Hello.
Hello. Yeah. Hello. Guten Morgen. Yeah. Julius.
Yeah.
You recording that?
Yeah.
It shows everything. It's a short picture to know. Well, he said it must be one that's at the, they took down some the settings. So this.
Does that sound?
It's still not. It's not showing it.
Call the special meeting to order.
No, it's not video recording.
Yes, it's recording.
It should show our picture.
Oh, it's not doing that part. I'll try going to.
Started working early.
What's
I
the,
was up to 2:30.
see how you get them.
Okay. He's in there.
You might have to
Oh, now it's
still going. Okay, let's call the village special village board meeting to order. 3:02. June 6th. I'd like to welcome Jeff Smith from Municipal Solutions. How are you, sir? Good. We're here to discuss our sewer rate update.
And I'm Jeff Smith from Municipal Solutions. We've been working on trying to establish a separate sewer fund with the advent of the new sewer wastewater treatment plant upgrades, removing the assessment methodology through the general fund into its own sewer operating fund, and based on the cost, the operational costs being distributed in a different manner other than assessed valuations we've seen in the past. When you start doing water and sewer rate analysis, there's no one size fits all. It's basically you're trying to come up with a method of charging customers so that they're fair, and equitable, the rates are easily understood, and they're defensible, that you've done your homework and you've come up with whatever rate structure that works for you. What I've recommended in the rate study so far is there is a charge for the debt service against the wastewater treatment plant, which would appear as a separate line on the sewer bill, which could be called a capital improvement charge, a debt service charge. Basically, you're showing the residents that here is the capital expenses that we're incurring for keeping the system updated. So anytime that there is a capital borrowing, you basically, that line item, each year you would come up with, it's based on what's called an equivalent dwelling unit. So basically we went through and we figured out what does on the water side, this is all based off of water billing because there's no meter for sewer, so you have to have something to go off. So basically what we've done is we've looked and we've seen that a typical residential user uses about 11,000 gallons. A family of 4 uses about 11,000 gallons of water a quarter. And that's interesting because it used to be 15 and 16. But with the water saving devices and everything that people have in their homes now, it's actually gone down. So we take that 11,000 and all residential users are charged 1 EDU, 1 equivalent dwelling. For commercial users, we divide that 11,000 into what their average, like over the last 2 quarters or the last year, even whatever footprint you want to use. We divide that 11,000 into their consumption, and we come up with a number of EDUs that they use. So basically, what you're trying to do on the debt service is you're trying to make sure that the single individual contributes towards the debt service, but not more, and doesn't subsidize the larger users. I think the biggest thing communities look at is what should that EDU basis be for, let's say a seasonal, like a hotel or something that's more seasonal. So that can be done a couple of ways, but it gets a little more complicated. Some communities will use a summer rate. Others will use just, they'll determine that we're going to average them out over, for some of the larger commercials, maybe they're going to average it out over 2 years for their consumption. And that could take into account a dry year, or it could take into account a bad year for, COVID hangover yet, or whatever is out there. But basically, once that EDU charge has been assigned, it sticks. And so each year, depending on the debt service, you just divide the number of EDUs into the debt service, and that's the amount you pay on your bill for the capital charge. So then after that, there is in order to we look at the operation and maintenance. What do you need to meet all of the bills for the O&M, and also a contribution to a reserve, so that there is money there when you need it. In that case, many times what we do is, in order to make sure that we've got a solid base, we'll do a minimum charge. So everyone would get charged on the O&M side, everyone gets charged a flat $39, $40, $49 a quarter for that charge. And that basically brings in enough money to keep cash flow going. Then the O&M on top of that, there's a rate per thousand after that of water consumption. Many times a community will say, well, maybe we should give a credit of a base bill plus the first 1,000 gallons or first 3,000 gallons is included in that minimum bill. And then anything beyond that, we charge an operation and maintenance per 1,000 gallons consumed a charge. So that's kind of what was recommended, is that it's basically a bill in 2 parts, one for the debt service and then one for the operation and maintenance.
So when you take into consideration a hotel or motel with 150 units, they're not necessarily 1 EDU, they're commercial rate, which is divided by their usage.
Yeah, could be used by their usage, or again, because this is kind of a unique community with a heavy amount of hotels and motels we have, you could do it by a room. There's 1 EDU is the base, and then however you decide you want to assign weight per room. We could do it that way also. And that's kind of where we need a little guidance of how would we go about coming up with a fair and equitable way of assigning that service. But basically, the assessed valuation really doesn't have any bearing on what demands they're putting, that residents or whatever is putting on the plan. So, I think the EDU would be a more equitable way, but how do we want to assign them is going to be the big thing.
Jeff, with the capital charge for the EDUs, that money gets placed separately because the O and M and the reserve are actual cash flow. Am I
Yeah,
correct?
well, they'll be collected on the bill. They'd be collected, right along with the bill.
Mhm.
And it can be deposited into the fund because it's that general fund is operating fund. So you are raising, enough money for the debt and the O and M. So it can all be deposited in the same
Okay,
account.
so we wouldn't actually list as capital improvement, because then if we get a bunch of people that say, is this money being set aside for the next capital
Yeah,
improvement?
it might be
How does
better to
that-
say debt service or,
Okay,
a debt service charge
Okay.
when we name it. So it is obvious to the residents of
okay.
what they're paying it for. So we could call it a debt service charge.
I just wasn't sure if it was an actual capital improvement account that we were starting
Yeah,
to
no,
establish, or if it was gonna be,
yeah. Now, in the rate structure, we have, come up with a annual transfer to capital reserve for repairs. So as part of the O and M costs, we have, repair and replacement reserve assumed that the board would set up as a capital reserve fund, and there would be a transfer into capital reserves. Many times what'll happen is you probably won't have a lot of costs because your plant is so new, although the transmission distribution system may be, another item that has to be looked at. So as part of this, what may be a good approach would be to also do an asset management plan, in the next year or 2 years, and figure out really how much you should be putting aside. And you may not want to pay 100% of it cash, but what makes sense to have in reserve for like critical pump failures, or find out what those items that when they go, you got to have some way of having some money available to pay for them. But, your bigger capital costs, you plan for that. And then you borrow, and then you put it against your debt service line item in the bill.
vicious cycle.
Oh, and yeah, and the whole United States is so far behind in its infrastructure that it's a cat chasing its tail, you're right. It'll never end, because we're so far behind. Last time we really invested in infrastructure in this country was FDR's day back in the WPA. And since then, other than highways in the 50s, that was another big thing under Eisenhower, we have not invested in our assets. So we're way behind the eight ball.
Well, we just invested a lot.
Yeah, you sure did.
I wanted to ask, is there like a national average that you would go by for, say, a hotel or motel room,
There,
as opposed to a single family dwelling where,
Yeah.
you could have up to 4 people, 5 people showering and using the toilets
Yeah.
on their hands?
there are some statistics that we could get if we want to go that way in the room. There are, like, DEC has statistics, but again, those are kind of overinflated, what they feel the consumption levels are. So we would want to maybe the best way, because it does vary from season to season here, it's gonna be different than in the south and places like that, that maybe what we ought to do is, you look at the consumption of all of the hotels, each individual ones, and then divide the number of rooms, if we know that. Now, I don't know if we know that or not.
Easy.
Easy to find out.
Probably find it out.
And then we could come up with, what is an average per room, this is how many thousand gallons, and then we could back into it that way, might be a way.
Some of the mom and pops that are on the outskirts aren't going to have the occupancy rate that's the larger.
Right,
hotels now.
right.
So be hard to that'd be apples and oranges there, I think.
Yeah, that,
By usage, then, you could go to,
Right, you'd have to kind of take an average and then
Right.
figure it out.
yeah.
or maybe,
Or if you want, you can have different levels. So you could say for motels from through 2 rooms or 3 rooms to 25 or wherever a break point would be, and then for 25 to 100, and then over 100, we could maybe even break it that way.
Lori, we did 1 to 20 and then 21 to 50.
My waterworks doesn't tell me how many rooms are in each hotel room.
Right, we talked about those.
We
that
did
tier
talk about
rate.
it, so we kind of looked at tiers. and
We went
doing,
down rabbit hole, several different.
Oh,
rabbit
good,
holes.
okay,
So,
yeah.
You know, breaking down the different types of commercial
Mhm.
establishments we have, whether they're just straight retail, hotel, motel, restaurant combinations. We have a lot of different.
Yeah,
combinations.
you do. Yeah, I mean,
So it's-
yours is not the easiest for sure.
So I ended up breaking it down as single family, one municipality, multifamily / retail, and then all different commercials. Just to try to give myself an idea of
Mhm.
what,
What your makeup is.
but again, our hotels, there's a huge difference between, you know, a couple of our hotels that have 8 rooms versus we have some much larger ones that use a lot of water. But they also have restaurants tied to those large. hotels as
Restaurants
well.
tied to them,
Laundry
maybe pools,
services.
yeah, laundry. So you're right, they're gonna vary, so maybe we should have some different levels, different break
And
points.
you would recommend a commercial rate as well as a residential rate?
Yeah.
Because residences aren't.
Yeah,
smoking
residents
people
are,
mostly.
well, I mean, you're gonna have residents that you wonder what they're doing. You know, they got 35,000 gallons of usage a quarter. There's always some of them. And I don't know, teenage kids or something, but, but to do the base rate for the debt, we would just put in 1 for every single. And then if they do use that 32,000 gallons, they would get a per gallon charge for the
Apartment, same.
Apartments, many times are, the first apartment is 1, each additional is like 0.5 on apartments. Now, I understand from the assessor that they really doesn't have the ability to break down anyone below 3 units. So he can tell from his, apparently his sheet, anything that's got more than 3 units. So we probably, for the multifamily, that's under 3 units, you could either do 1 or you could do 1.5 or something. Just keep it consistent. And then you do have the data on the number of units after that, the assessor can, as I understand it, the assessor can tell you how many units are in there.
So it's basically, we figure out what it costs us, minus the revenues that we're already getting from God bless you. Pay the town,
The county, yeah, the county, so,
well, as
But-
far as, yeah, what we're
Yeah.
receiving from Hearthstone, Caldwell Sewer District, the haulers.
Yeah.
I have them all listed here. Interest and penalties was another one I wanted to discuss at this meeting. Because we're not charging very much for our water rent when it needs to be allocated to the town. I don't think we're charging enough. What, $25 or something like that, when they don't pay their water bill, so we put it on their taxes.
Yeah, our
Really,
relay fee is $25.
seems like that could make up for a shortfall that we're already experiencing in water, if
Okay.
someone was to not pay their sewer bill on time.
the late charges are pretty universal, about 10%.
Okay.
10%?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So we're like 9% off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not compounded, it's a one-time, you know,
Of that usage
for that
bill.
usage, for that, so it doesn't compound that.
So is
But-
it 10% monthly if they're late, or just what do you?
It's a one-time, per quarter, so per quarter, so if they're delinquent, you add 10% to the bill after the next bill comes.
Because right now we do 1.5%, but each month.
Oh,
So if
okay.
my bill is due May 31st, on June, I normally add about 7 to 8 days, depending on holidays and, you know, make sure the bills are, anything's postmarked after that date, start to do 1.5% this month, and the next month do another 1.5 if they have not paid still.
On the unpaid.
On the
total
unpaid.
unpaid bill?
6.5% off.
Yeah.
Instead of.
And then we do that for each month. And then, of course, it rolls into the next
Yeah.
quarter bill.
Yeah.
And then after, once a year, we levy the town, and once a year, we levy the village.
Yep. So, I mean, that's, you're getting some revenues, but I think you could probably.
So figuring quickly, we took what it cost to, and I don't want to get too specific with numbers, but we're not even remotely close to establishing it. We took what we take to, what it costs to run the sewer plant, and it might be a bit high because we're still finishing some things up, and then what we take off the revenues to offset that cost. We would come up with a number that we're gonna have to be raised by a certain percentage of debt service and a certain percentage of O&M.
Yeah, and then each year at budget time, you can review, how you're doing and adjust rates so that you don't have to do huge rate increases.
And then,
Uh,
sorry, I didn't mean that, my wheels are turning, it's hard to stop. In fairness to a retail store, they still are commercial rate. Would you consider doing tiered commercial rates, like commercial retail or commercial restaurant, commercial hotel, and then commercial hotel with a restaurant?
You can do all that. It just depends on administration, of the system. It's just how much of a burden is going to put on the billing department. If we start doing-
AKA Lori.
Yeah. So.
I mean, because I could see an attorney saying, geez, why do you have me listed at this one flat commercial rate when, yeah, it's commercial, but I have one half bath that I use to
Mhm.
service my office.
Mhm. So, well, he would be assigned, let's say it was that small user, he would be assigned one EDU as a commercial,
Mhm.
and then he would pay the same rate as any residential for every 1,000 gallons of water that was consumed after that.
So I don't know, it seems like we have so many uses other than just residential. We have a lot of levels of commercial use, and I'm getting some head nods in the
So that's, and again, what fits for your locality, so we definitely can do that. Probably the board would want to decide, what structure you want to follow, and then we can, the rest is kind of just math after that. How much money do you got to generate to keep the doors open? But those are some of the concepts, we kind of got to iron out before we can go much farther. So it's the Lori factor. How complicated do we want to get, but still make it, very reasonable?
She's gonna share with you the stuff that we came up with an explanation, not now,
Yeah.
but because it does contain personal information and I don't want
No, yeah.
to put that out just to you, we will, but, not in a public forum like this. We did a few different tiers.
Oh, good,
of
okay.
those As
Yeah.
examples to see but it seems like they're kind of high and I don't want to shock people without offsetting it with property taxes.
Yeah.
Covered, and I'm not finding that solution yet. And I spoke as myself as the only person working on it. I'm not, I have a lot of help.
Yeah. Now, did your computations, one of the things that was mentioned was, with the increased parking revenues, transferring like 400,000 a year, from the general fund over to the sewer fund, from parking revenues. Because without the wastewater treatment plant and the water service, you don't have tourism.
Right, that's where I wanted to justify setting up a sewer fund, because I can even use occupancy tax to offset some of the costs to the consumers. I don't know that that's double dipping if I use we can use the parking money for whatever we want.
Yeah,
We really can.
yeah.
That's easy to justify too,
Yes.
because people are parking their cars and using the public rest.
And we wouldn't have built a plant that big if they weren't here.
Exactly, and you're exporting, technically, probably, a large part of the parking fees are from people visiting, here. So that you are exporting some of you're actually distributing some of the costs for providing that service to the outsiders.
I I don't think that this is something you can do every year from parking.
Not, it depends on how much. We had that one reserve fund that was replenishing itself that we set aside for before the completion of the, and judging by what it made in 2 years, it might not sustain itself at that level, at 400,000 a year. It might. We'd have to get another year under our belts to really make sure that we are replenishing it in a manner that we're not draining it faster than it's coming in.
Just keep in mind that your utilities such as water and sewer are self-sustaining. They're completely separate from your general. You can't transfer money between those accounts.
Well, you could, if the
You can
board,
borrow.
no, the board could make a decision, like we've said, because as long as they can justify why they're doing that transfer.
Every
So
year.
Every year it could be an interfund transfer, and it's to support the sewer system from the revenues raised from the park.
Would it be possible to measure the water and subsequently the sewer to all the public restrooms? Then come up with what they are, what the cost is for them to measure it, or?
I mean, they're not all using public restrooms. They could be using the restroom in the restaurant that they're staying in order to.
Well, then they pay for it.
Right.
That's their
Yeah.
customer.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
I don't know if
We have meters on our.
meters.
We have meters on the.
The public restrooms will have.
Water meters in the public
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
We can track the water.
You don't pay.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, we can track.
Still gotta quantify it.
So you could come up with a number of what it costs
Yeah,
to service all those people that aren't using a restaurant in one town. Bathroom, restaurant.
That's a good way to justify it. You're right.
are those meters read
Fair.
as part of
Yeah,
it?
I'm sure that's why I'm trying to take it.
We've got
I don't wanna put
that
on
up.
anybody's back solely, but.
The user.
Right.
And yet, the good part of putting it, taking it out of the general fund and putting it in a rate that the business person, the motel owner, the restaurant owner, they can pass that on to the consumer. The person living at home can pass it on to anybody.
And they can make internal improvements where, they know what their consumption is, and there might be ways that they could reduce the amount.
Well, I've heard that there's actually even on some hotels on your bill, there's a line item for. Give it a fancy name, like clean water, not clean water. You wouldn't want to put that.
There's a percentage to that.
But they would say something like environmental or something, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking
There's
about.
initiatives that they could put, I've seen it in 100 places where, hey, if you're staying another night, you might want to reuse your towel. So
Well, those things, yeah.
But that's part of that. They can instill that, but also a line charge for.
But when you're paying double now, they're paying water and sewer, they get a little more incentive to try to save.
Yeah, you will see, anytime you do a rate increase, you'll see consumption goes down. So you don't make exactly what you're planning on, because people will take conservation measures.
Costs will go down, but then we also just have to adjust the rate.
Yep.
So keep the
Yeah,
shit
that's,
running.
so is it like an annual review at budget time, see how you're doing? This is a little tough because we don't have a good base yet. We're starting to keep getting more information as time goes by. So this first one is definitely gonna be kind of a stab in the dark. Educated guess, but it's something that you're definitely gonna wanna look at after a year.
So you typically aim high, probably.
I think it's better to, I think it is easier to reduce than it is to jack up, 15% or something.
Well, I don't want to swap money is the other thing, and I think we're all in agreement. We were kind of being told that that's what people thought we were doing, was taking money from the income or the property taxes.
And then bringing it
applying
over
to
there.
the sewer, and,
Yeah.
and the two are equal. I don't want that to
No.
be, because I do want to transfer funds and find ways to save money or to subsidize the plant, with occupancy tax or reserves from parking to make it, we still want to reduce our taxes because they're actually getting another bill now. Instead
Yeah.
of once a year, they're getting it quarterly, and
Yeah.
it shouldn't be equal.
Right.
To the drop in their property taxes.
For some people will be a win, some will be a loss, and some will break even probably.
I
You're
think,
about
but
right, yeah.
yeah, I think generally it depends on
Well, we-
usage. and
we
that could be-
saw that.
could be adjusted.
We saw that, when the rate was set for that group of outside users. Some of their bills went down, some stayed about the same, and some increased.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you figured it first, did you do tiered between commercial and residential?
That was all residential, so we
Okay.
didn't have to get into.
Okay,
So
so we,
like the Lockley
Mhm,
area,
okay.
yeah, there's no commercial.
So it was based on, when you do that, you bring equity in instead of using the assessed value figure. It doesn't have any relation.
It's easy that way.
Goes back to your
It is.
annexation that goes up there. They would have every reason to annex. Oh, yeah. I mean, we talked about it in a couple of areas of the town and very close to the village.
Because they don't have the ability to subsidize it anyway. They're not parking there. It's gonna be tough for them to. It's the load. It's right around.
Yeah, and you have, I mean, the town has a sizable percentage of consumption.
God bless you.
So the rates inside the village, if you did do that transfer of money, from parking, or whatever, the rates inside the village will be lower than the town rates.
Well, I kind of feel like that we're gonna have to figure out how much based on the flows, because we can do that with the town and then send them a bill and we're responsible for the rest. Because we can accurately do that. And the town obviously can figure out, I don't want to speak for you, Dan, but you guys will have a way to figure out, you have based on units or bedrooms or.
We have our own formula,
Yeah.
yeah, kind of similar to what, instead of, our debt capital component is AB,
Yeah.
not EDUs.
Okay.
But we can't do usage for O&M because we don't have, you guys have, everyone on water is on sewer.
Yeah.
We don't have that, so we have this weird unit formula. It works.
I think basically, if we have the concept pretty well defined of how we want to do this, then the next step will be, how do we want to get into the equity, especially with, the different types of users you have there. That would be the next step. And sounds like you've already,
Well, how do we also make it fair and equitable for our businesses that aren't open year round? So are they paying this
They
capital
would-
improvement charge in the winter when they're not using the services?
yeah, because the debt service has to be paid, and it's more or less to have the service delivered to your door. You have to have it. We hear it a lot with water too. It's like, well, I go to
Yeah,
Florida.
you pay for the
yeah.
service.
Yeah, you pay for the service, you got fire protection, you got hydrants. The same thing is that in order to get that service to your door, we had to pay this price, this debt service. We have to pay it. And I think it's only equitable that everyone pay, even if they're not there year round.
So you would say they would get an allotment of a.
They get an
11,000
EDU.
gallons and then one
Yeah.
EDU.
And they get a base, whatever the base we set for the O&M side, and then.
No. I think a lot of, depend on what Lori's water program can handle
handle,
with the
yeah.
tiers and allowing the setup of the different levels that we're talking about doing.
Yeah, and then it's gonna be, like we talked about it, so if someone buys a retail store and turns it into a laundromat, we're gonna have to know about that in order to bill them appropriately. Or restaurant to retail store, sometimes that goes the other way.
Well, we see that where, it's recommended that you touch base with the assessor at budget time and see if there have been any changes. Because we've got water districts. I've been called in a couple of times, just comptroller comes in. And water districts were established 30 years ago, and new houses were built, and they never got built. Houses that burned down, they were still getting bills. I mean, so to start this check, this annual check with the assessor and keep on top of what your profile is. And it's very easy. They can do that so easy now. Centralized assessing system.
Yeah, we have some cleanup that we have to do because we have classifications in the waterworks that. And Lori, what was an example of some of the classifications where it was listed as a,
We have retail, multifamily, and then we also have restaurant, hotel. I don't have a breakdown of different hotel levels though, like it's either a
Right.
hotel or not a hotel,
right,
Yeah.
or it's hotel with restaurant. I don't have hotel with 25 rooms, hotel with 50 rooms. So I would have to reach out to our program and see if that's something that I'm assuming that I could do, but I don't want to assume anything.
Yeah, we want to look at that, and then I'm thinking the assessor should have a property card that he could tell you how many. Would give you a list of how many rooms each one had, I would think. And whether it's got a restaurant.
so heavy on the flow for commercial rates.
Mhm.
That's all that we have to depend on is water in, water out.
Yeah,
No, I know we've thrown around this 11,000
Yeah.
quarterly average, but I also want to keep in mind that that is the skewed average, because our average, we have a lot of snowbirds. So yes, our residential quarterly average is 11,000, which is lower than national average, but when they are here, it is significantly higher. For those months that they are here, our averages do increase. So I don't know if we want to use 11,000 as our base, because like I said, that's kind of not, I think we need to do more of a weighted average to make it more fair and
We
equitable.
could do that too.
Just because it, when you're gone 6 months out of the year, your water average is down.
Down,
But
yeah.
you can
You
have.
become a minimum user.
Yeah.
And we still have
But I
minimum users that live here year round. too,
Yeah, so
that-
right now for the water, you have up to 11,000 gallons for those, and I think for sewer, that might not be the best route, I think you might want to pick a smaller number.
Okay.
So that we're actually billing more based on usage, and that's on that 11,000 mark, so maybe start the meter clicking at 4,000 or 5,000. Just so it's a little bit more like
Well,
you're paying
yeah.
for what you use, and I, who's gone 6 months a year, I'm not paying up to 11,000 when I only ever use 1,000. Cause I'm here once a week.
The 11,000 number was for determining
Yeah.
the EDU, but not for the O and M side.
Yeah.
In my mind, I was thinking probably about 3,000 gallons.
Yeah, 'cause-
Then it's for any usage beyond 3,000.
And I think that would be a little bit more fair and equitable based on usage rather than,
Right, right,
yeah.
yeah.
Like we do for water, it's just. so
That's
many
fine.
people.
Yeah, because you'll pick up, it's easily, even for your minimum bills, many times when you do the profile, which we'll do in the report when we get it all done, but when you do the profile, there'll be 16 to 18% of your users are paying the minimum bill. You wonder how they do it, but, well, maybe they're not there in the first place, but even people who live here year round, you'll have a pretty good number that don't exceed the minimum.
My question though is if we drop that, to say like fair and equitable for seasonal, how much does our change of cost, like how much does the cost change for the sewer and the water treatment plant? Because if it's not changing that much, then all of a sudden, our winter months, we're not making enough money to cover our expenses.
Well, that has nothing to do with covering the expenses. It's what you're charging for the use. I mean, I kind of think 11,000 is high for,
Yeah, it is.
if there's over 15% are still minimum users, then our minimum use is too much. And they're actually getting a service sort of for free in a sense.
So by setting it lower, if you set it at 3,000 or so, you're actually bringing in more money because when you're at 11, you got to set your base higher in order to cover the costs. Because your usage, you're going to find that I wouldn't be surprised if over 70% of 11,000 don't pay much more. The minimum bill.
We have.
Which for water would be a fairly accurate statement. We do have a lot of users that never hit that $11,000 mark or gallon mark. They'll hit very close to it for an average family. But quarterly, they're right underneath that 11,000, so they don't pay per gallon at that point. They just pay that.
Yeah, just a base.
then what it is, it's about roughly, estimate, I'm not sure if national average would hold true, but it's $4 to $5 per thousand above.
Yeah.
The minimum usage. So it's not like they're not paying per gallon. Though they are essentially, but per thousand gallon.
Still the best deal in town.
We're not getting into how much everything is costing today.
Well, we can do that. I don't want to say that because we're not done actually quantifying what things are gonna cost. The plant barely has a year underneath its belt.
Yeah.
I'd feel comfortable if we got through a third season this year. Or, you know, we'll talk about it throughout the summer, maybe in different workshops, but I do want to, from this moment on, I do want to spend at least one meeting a month on it. And not everybody has to attend every time, but you know, you'll be apprised of what we go over, but for workshop purposes, and we can meet, just not take any action. So I do want everybody to be involved in it because I feel like we all should be involved in it. It's a good round, table discussion to have.
It's been a long, heavy lift.
It has.
We're coming down to the final stage. We have to do it right.
All hands on
You're
deck.
still gonna have some people that aren't gonna be happy.
You're always gonna have somebody that's not happy, and somebody that might look at the recording, still recording, that would say, oh, they're gonna screw the hotel owners. We're really not. That's not our goal at all. We want to make it fair and equitable to all.
Well, I think the businesses in general have had it pretty good for a long time. You know, based on the current system of assessed value, so.
Mhm.
You can't argue with fair, and that's our goal, is to kind of make it as fair as possible for
Yeah.
everybody. And pay the bills.
Yeah, that's the first matter of business.
So I think we're getting there, and it'll be the Lori factor.
Yeah, well, Lori has worked quite tirelessly, as has Danae, and Julie's probably tired of listening to me talk about it in the office.
And like I say, it's, each community is unique, and yours is definitely a unique community. Your profile of the users is.
Does anyone else have any questions? Anybody? There, Keith, Tim, Sean, Dan? Anybody?
Is there already a draft report or?
It's very draft, because I couldn't go much further until we had a discussion with the full board to make sure that the concept works. And once we have the concept, and we should be able to wrap this up pretty quickly now after we talk.
Yeah, Lori pulled fresh.
I did send those numbers to you.
Yeah, yeah. So, but your idea of breaks or, you know, different class of motels, we want to refine that as far as.
Bigger motel has bigger laundry service, so there's more water usage. So, yeah, maybe you want to tier it, but you also still have to have a rate that they pay for gallonage. In some respects.
Some hotels still have their stuff being shipped out.
So,
But that would be reflected in the.
Reflected in the usage.
yeah, so we should gear it then towards up the consumption.
The consumption seems to be the most, well, it costs more to treat more water, so. you know,
Oh, definitely, yeah, you're putting a heavier demand, and that demand's gotta be there, so you had to build that in, as your capacity.
Actually, I want to talk to my, right, some like, for instance, the pump, I understand that their output of water is harder to handle because there's more.
Or BOD?
Higher BOD, is there like an industrial, factor?
We even talked about that by water size or water pipe size. And that's part of that rabbit hole I was telling you about, is you go into that and there's one more factor that you're.
You usually don't see that, except when you get into large industrial or dairy that are putting high BOD loads, where you do an assessment, a special assessment. But again, that gets, there's compliance and, compliance issues with, determining that and making sure they're staying within their parameters. We're finding out the best way is pre-treatment at the plant site itself, so they don't give you those heavy dumps and then take it from there. But there are places that do that, but usually it's for heavier industry or like I say, right now I'm working with the city of Batavia and they have a huge dairy operation there. And they're upsetting the system with their IDODs, milk is tough.
Yeah, you know, Tim, not to speak for Tim, was considering updates to the sewer use law, right? And you might define in that law the maximum constituents, right, for each gallon of wastewater, so that if you have somebody that is discharging something that's harder to treat, you have a sewer use law that you can.
Yeah, that's the place to get to that. Yeah, in your use law rather than your rate structure. That would be the place to go. Right.
So, I'm just hearing some of the stuff that Jeff's asking and wondering the same thing. So is the idea now for Jeff to create an EDU schedule based on consumption, based on historic consumption? And then for Lori, is that something, if he comes up with a rate schedule based on EDUs, is that something you can input into Waterworks?
Well, it would be a process. You'd have to, I think you'd have to set up, so I'd have to set the new sewer district and then in that district itself, set up new routes. And then we'd have to set all the customer specifications up as well.
Yeah.
It would be time consuming.
Yeah.
It's an older program, so it's not like I can just import from Excel or something.
Right.
easily. So I'd have to manually go through and do every single one.
Yeah, so you'd say this tax bank number happens to be a hotel.
Yeah.
However many units.
Get the
You-
classification from Lori Barber, the assessor, that has 200 rooms or has 50 rooms. And yeah, I'd have to set each one of those up and then tie them into our existing water tiers
Yeah.
because we're basing on usage, correct?
Well,
Is what we're
that's what
thinking.
Jeff
I'm
is.
I'm thinking.
And everyone's
Or the other method is take their consumption, divided by the 11,000.
I just don't know if I'm comfortable using that
Yeah,
11,000 number.
Yeah,
Well, I would even think to rethink that on our water. If maybe that's too much allotment of water for.
yeah, you might want to just drop your minimum usage down and see what that does for your rates. I mean, you know, you may have a rate increase without having a rate increase, basically. You know, yeah, so.
So would it be worth it for Lori to search for an updated program that can handle this with no problems? Since we're gonna be entering it all.
I think the idea of changing the program, and doing this at the same time sounds like a
Yeah.
horrible idea.
I think
Yeah.
Waterworks can handle it. We're not reinventing the wheel
We're
here.
not, it's just,
It's gonna
Any
take some
program-
time. It's,
I think I'll do it.
yeah.
Yeah, I think, and the gentleman who runs it is amazing, so like, if we switch programs right now, like, right now I call him, I get a person on the line, I'm not on hold for an hour.
Which is very hard in this, I don't think the municipal, software. I don't know if there's enough of them or what, but there seems to be a problem with support. Almost.
But he's amazing, and he would walk me through the entire process, it would take, it'd be time consuming, but, you know, it's not. You can sit and focus for a day or maybe a week, and get it done, it'll be done.
One other thing I wanted to bring to the attention of the board, it was brought to my attention that some of these larger facilities and commercial properties have a bypass on their meter. And it's been, you know, sort of caught on accident that one of our guys will go in and the bypass and the meter is half open each. So they're still getting the same amount of water, but they're only paying for, say, possibly half of it. I think we should look into changing, and I think we can go in anytime as long as they have a.
Oh,
water,
yeah, we have.
Or maybe instilling an inspection program. To catch these bypasses. stay on
Fabulous
tape.
idea.
Yeah, and there's,
So now that these people are stealing water, now
They're gonna be stealing sewer or, you
it's
know.
double the incentive
Yeah.
now.
yeah, we should, part of that, inspection and so on, there should be a system, that would actually, create like a seal. That if it had been tampered with, that you would know it right off the bat, like you do with your
Like on your power meter.
power meter, that type of thing.
Or you
That
pay
we should
gas,
be able to have,
roll through it.
and it's mostly the larger users, obviously. We've seen them, same thing, the valve's not open all the way, it's halfway, but either way, it's not what we're looking for.
It'll catch up to us eventually.
But also some of these, the older hotels that aren't seasonal, it's easy to bypass, you just,
Right,
the pipes are all above ground.
yeah, it'd be a process for the inspection by itself, just to get used to it and people understanding, well, that's why we're gonna be there and all that kind of stuff.
Unless if you get a good measurement, you can say, why is this motel so much lower than the typical hotel? Because, they think that.
Well,
Tricks
actually,
up
we
this-
might be doing that work now, so we'll know a 25-unit hotel and a 25-unit hotel are using $40,000
And we-
or 40,000 gallons different.
With our
I'm sure
cellular
that-
endpoints, they, so I can pull off different reports from those. And we've caught a few that way where I said, oh, that's weird, last week you were at this many gallons per week, and now all of a sudden you're at half of that. Or all of a sudden it goes up the opposite way, because, someone turned off the bypass, and then I send our gentleman down there, and they're just like, what's going on? It seems everything's to be working now. And then we have that awkward conversation, and then Chris goes, or one of our gentlemen will go back a week or two later, and, oh, that valve, I don't know who keeps turning that valve. So we are catching them, and with our programs, we can, but there's just a few people who chronically do it.
Of all the costs to run a business,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
when you're gonna feel.
Yeah.
Hard, it doesn't seem like.
And now sewer.
So,
But the other thing I wanted to ask, guys, is what are we going, for the re-levy, are we going to re-levy, should people not pay, how is that gonna work?
I think we
We're
should
gonna make sure to tie that in.
identify our costs and tie that into our structured sewer rate. We should add it to the water rate too.
Cause I did take,
Adjust
I went back to 2015 and did the average.
Really change that instead of the same.
Right, we should definitely take Jeff's recommendation on how we bill for that. Instead of billing monthly, you bill quarterly.
We already bill quarterly.
No, I
No,
mean,
it's
on
fine.
how,
Oh, for the-
Yeah.
instead of concerning
Yeah.
yourself with every month,
Every month.
you're just throwing a larger percentage on the same number.
Yeah.
I mean,
Rather
'cause
than
our-
throwing a
our
really
water-
small percentage on 3
Yeah,
times.
cause it's not sensitive to pay on time, cause we average about 48,000 that we re-levy just for village water.
That's untapped resources right there.
So,
Mhm.
I mean, we have a lot of people, and it's always the same list over and over
A
again.
lot of people do that, so that they can get a break on their income stack. They're not supposed to, but.
That the trick I was wondering.
Yeah.
I don't know what the trick is, I just know that I don't get the money.
so is there two things happening? One is this evaluation of certain uses and how much water they use. That's happening separate of what Jeff's trying to do, which it
Yeah.
sounded like, Jeff, you were gonna go back to a year's worth of data and divide the minimum consumption by the consumption of each use to come up with an EDU for each use.
After we decide, yeah. And if we can do the hotels by rooms, that makes, I think it's even more defensible if we can do that.
Oh, it was separate, and we happen to be doing, we have to notice our plant puts out this much water, and we're billing for this much water,
Yeah.
and we know we use this much for like hydrants, and we use this much for our, municipalities. And when I said, well, that's a big difference, and I thought at first it was just a typo, so we went back and checked, so now we've been really trying to figure out where we're losing that, and we're
Mhm.
finding a lot. And we found several that are kind of big numbers, and I think next year we're gonna see a huge difference in that report.
Oh,
Um,
consumption by folks that might not be fully metered.
Fully metered, or, they're
Bypassing.
maybe running a line to somewhere.
Yeah.
We're finding some oddities that we're addressing as best we can.
I mean, even a tight system, for water is like, if you're below 10% usage, it's a fairly tight system, but I've seen communities that, have 70% unaccounted for water. They got leaks. But
There's
they're
definitely
not
leaks.
really going after.
Leaders.
70%. But, but if you can get down there, if you can get, in that 10% range, you're doing pretty good.
We're getting there.
And it's a lot to swallow, even though we really haven't gotten into the hard numbers. Lori and I, Danae have, our heads are still swimming, so it's a lot to take in. We can talk again.
When do you think
individually.
you'll be ready to implement this?
Well, we're hoping, and we talked about this, we're hoping for third quarter of our fiscal year, which would be April, May, and June. No,
No.
March, April, May.
Yeah.
Just so that, because we have monies set aside to run the plant for the year. If we just stop running the plant and rely on our bills to come in, we're gonna fall short of paying our bills, so. It could be established by a credit system, because people may have already been considered that they've already paid for that in the,
The
before.
transition
during the
from one
transition
system to
period.
the other.
Or we take some money out of our capital reserves and be the big brother to the wastewater, the fledgling wastewater treatment fund. That's to be decided, and we can do that at another time. And just think about the two ways that I can think of to option. Other than having a bake sale, we don't have another option.
The ideal also is, since you're creating a whole new budget, you're creating a whole new checking, you're creating everything for this.
Yeah, because our water funds is completely separate. If you look at your budgets,
Yeah.
it's completely separate from. the general fund.
Ideally, it's June 1st.
One of the-
That way you have nothing in your general that's sewer related, and you have your sewer. You have your account set up, your deposits are going into your sewer account. Everything is streamlined, just like your water is.
And then whatever it takes for the village to loan the fund, you pay it back over a rate adjusted period.
Right.
And that could be 1 quarter or maybe 2 quarters, just so people don't get, drinking from the fire hose on the bill.
Yeah.
It's a good water analogy right there. Did you catch that?
This has been very helpful. I think, we can move forward now.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Be in
Thanks,
touch.
Jeff.
Thanks, guys. I don't have anything else. I don't think we really can in this meeting. I don't think it was advertised as.
It was just a special
Just-
meeting.
yeah.
Just a regular special meeting, so.
So, welcome back, Trustee Root from your world travels. Welcome back from the North Country Jail. Thanks for the ride earlier. Allison, good to see you. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Go order.
Yes.
Need a vacation soon.
Yeah.
I just had one.